Hello everyone. Today we follow a story filled with compassion and humanity after painful events in the life of a young girl named Tieu Hue, and a stranger who is willing to help her while she is being chased. If you enjoy stories about Lytieuhue, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support us. Inside the quiet space of a small house on the mountainside, Tieu Hue slowly opened her eyes and felt a strange warmth spreading through her body, which had been frozen by fear and exhaustion during days of escape. Her breathing gradually became steady as a sense of safety wrapped around her broken spirit. She looked around the simple room under the dim light of an oil lamp, and the presence of Tuan along with his gentle care slowly softened the caution in her eyes. For the first time after the forced marriage and terrifying escape, she felt true peace, as if protected by a strong wall against the cruel and deceitful world outside. Inside her heart was a mixture of emotions: deep gratitude for the man who saved her life, overwhelming relief that she was still treated as a human being, and a fragile happiness beginning to grow. This peaceful moment was not only physical rest but also the first emotional anchor, marking the beginning of her healing journey after facing death alone. As the pain in her body slowly faded, the pain in her heart resurfaced when Tuan gently handed her a cup of warm tea and softly asked why she had to run through the forest in a torn wedding dress. Tieu Hue hesitated, her thin hands trembling as she held the cup, gathering courage. Then, through broken sobs, she told him the truth about her forced marriage, about the wealthy man over 60 years old, 30 years older than her, living with many wives under strict and violent rules. She confessed the humiliation of being treated as an object by her own brother to pay off his gambling debts. She spoke about the fear of abuse and the horrifying stories of previous wives being beaten, and her desperate wish to live a normal life and choose her own happiness. The room became heavy with emotion, but her honesty made Tuan feel deep sympathy and anger for her situation. Suddenly, she realized the danger still surrounding her. She admitted she was being hunted and had nowhere to go. She worried that if those people found this place, they would bring harm to him. With guilt and fear, she asked to stay for a few days until she could recover, promising to leave as soon as possible, not wanting to become a burden. But Tuan simply smiled gently, his eyes full of understanding. He told her she could stay as long as she wanted. He shared that he had lived alone for too long, and her presence brought warmth into his life. He even invited her to help with the garden when she felt better. His simple but sincere words touched her deeply, and from that moment, he became the most reliable support in her life. The following days felt like a peaceful dream, two lonely souls living together, sharing simple meals filled with kindness. Tieu Hue slowly regained her strength, her smile returned, and she discovered a simple happiness she had never imagined. Her feelings for Tuan quietly grew, deep and natural. But behind that fragile peace, danger still approached, as the people chasing her continued searching through the forests, and her traces could be discovered at any moment, signaling that a storm was coming to break this fragile calm. Tuan sat across from Tieu Hue at a simple wooden table, the firelight casting a calm and compassionate glow on his face. He gently pushed a bowl of hot soup toward her, then in a warm and steady voice, he softly asked about the real reason that had forced a young girl like her into such desperation in the middle of the forest at night. Tieu Hue flinched slightly, her thin hands gripping the edge of the bowl to find a bit of warmth and courage. She hesitated for a long moment in the silence of the wooden house, then her trembling words began to flow like a river that had been held back for too long. She began to tell him about the horrifying wedding she had just escaped, an event that should have been filled with happiness but instead marked the beginning of her living nightmare. The man she was forced to marry was a wealthy but infamous figure in his 60s, a man 3 times her age, living with multiple wives in a household filled with oppression and cruelty. pain and humiliation surged through her as she confessed that she had never been given a choice. Her own brother, the only family she had left, had heartlessly turned her into nothing more than a bargaining object, because of his gambling addiction and the overwhelming debts he could not repay. He had sold her in exchange for his own safety. Tieu Hue described the overwhelming fear of having to live under the same roof as that cruel man, a place where she had heard terrifying stories of previous wives being abused and beaten until they were left crippled. Tears streamed down her face and fell into the bowl of soup as she spoke. She said she did not need wealth or luxury. She only longed for one simple thing: to live as a normal person, to be free and to be respected. The truth filled the room with a heavy and suffocating atmosphere, revealing the cruelty of human greed. She spoke about sleepless nights in the cold wedding room before her escape, where darkness surrounded her and mocking laughter echoed around her lowly status. The betrayal of her brother felt like a knife piercing her heart, making her realize that she had no home left, no one to rely on in this world. Tuan listened silently, without interruption, but his hands tightened and his eyes revealed deep anger and sympathy for her tragic fate. He saw that behind her fragile appearance was a strong will, a soul crying out for justice, a determination that had carried her through miles of forest in search of a fragile hope. Her pain was not just a personal story, it was an accusation against a world where money could buy dignity and freedom. She told him about the moment she jumped out of the wedding car, choosing to face the dangers of the forest rather than return to a life of humiliation. Every detail of her story made Tuan feel her suffering, from tearing apart her wedding dress to move freely, to her bare feet stepping on sharp stones to reach this place. When she finished, she had no strength left. She lowered her head onto the table, her shoulders trembling with sobs. The room fell silent, with only the sound of the fire crackling as if sharing her pain. But within that silence, an unspoken understanding formed between them. Tuan realized that his role was not only to save her life, but to help her rebuild her trust and dignity. Her painful truth broke the final barrier between them, leaving behind sadness but also opening a door to connection, where two lonely souls began to find understanding in the vast wilderness. After releasing her painful confessions, Tieu Hue seemed completely exhausted. She lifted her head and looked at Tuan with swollen eyes from crying, her gaze now filled not only with sadness but also with a deep and growing fear of what might come next. Her lips trembled as she admitted that she was being relentlessly chased by the henchmen of her former groom and her cruel brother, and that she had truly reached the end of the road, with nowhere left in this world to hide or continue. Fear was visible in every small movement as she instinctively glanced toward the dark window, where the rustling trees made her imagine the figures of hunters searching through the bushes. She expressed her greatest fear, that her presence here would eventually be discovered, and that it would bring unimaginable danger to Tuan, the man who had saved her life. With overwhelming helplessness and the pride of someone who did not want to harm an innocent person, she begged him to let her stay for just a few days, only enough for her wounded feet to recover and for her mind to calm down. She promised with all sincerity that as soon as she regained some strength, she would leave immediately and disappear into the forest, so she would not become a burden or a threat to his peaceful life. In that moment, Tieu Hue appeared like a wounded bird seeking a temporary place to rest before flying back into the storm, showing both fragile weakness and strong determination. She did not want to take advantage of his kindness. She feared that her dark past would destroy that kindness, so every word she spoke carried both a desire to live and the pain of troubling a stranger. She said she was willing to do anything, from cleaning to working in the garden, just to exchange for a small corner of peace for a few days, because outside there was nothing but danger and people who valued money more than human life. Her pleading eyes met the calm silence of Tuan, creating a heavy pause between them, where a desperate request waited for an answer that could change everything. She feared that if he refused, she would be forced to return to the endless darkness of the forest, where death might come faster than freedom. Yet at the same time, she prepared herself to leave, because she would rather face wild beasts than drag him into the same danger. This intense internal struggle made her face even paler, her lips trembling with every distant sound from the forest. She warned that those people were cunning and could track her quickly, making her stay here a dangerous risk for both of them. Her honesty revealed her strength and selflessness. She did not ask for permanent protection, only for a brief moment of warmth so her soul would not freeze in fear. Inside the small wooden house, her plea echoed like a cry for help from someone pushed to the edge, placing a life-changing decision onto the man before her. She lowered her head and waited, her breathing heavy as if standing before a judgment that would decide her fate. Each second felt like an eternity, and deep inside, she told herself that no matter the outcome, she would always be grateful for the brief moment of peace he had given her in that fateful night. Tuan smiled gently, a warm smile like morning sunlight that melted the cold fear surrounding the wounded heart of the young girl. He did not hesitate for even a second, his eyes filled with trust and compassion as he spoke in a calm but firm voice, telling her that she could stay in this house for as long as she wanted. Those words felt like a healing remedy, instantly removing the fear of becoming a burden from Tieu Hue's heart. He slowly shared about his quiet life in isolation, explaining that he had lived alone in the vast mountains for a long time, and that her sudden presence was not a trouble, but instead brought warmth into his once silent life. To help her feel more comfortable, Tuan sincerely suggested that she could help with light tasks such as taking care of the garden or watering plants when she felt strong enough. His simple and honest words carried great comfort, making Tieu Hue deeply emotional. Tears once again filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief. In her heart, the image of this rugged man with warm hands was becoming her most reliable support, a peaceful shelter she had long desired in a world full of cruelty and deception. He did not just give her a place to stay, he gave her respect and a reason to believe in better things again. Every small action of his, from adjusting her bed to explaining the work around the farm, made her feel that she truly belonged here, a feeling she had never experienced even in her own brother's house. She watched his strong figure as he stepped outside to prepare more firewood for the coming winter, and felt a new strength rising within her, pushing her to become stronger so she would not waste his kindness. His protection was not like the imprisonment she had faced before, it was freedom within care, a place where she could be herself, where she could be weak and also begin again. A new chapter in Tieu Hue's life had truly begun in this small wooden house, where kindness and humanity overcame greed and cruelty. She took a deep breath, feeling the scent of wood and the sweetness of forest tea, knowing that no matter how dangerous the outside world could become, at this moment she had found someone willing to stand by her against every storm of fate. In the days that followed, the life of Tieu Hue and Tuan flowed in a rare sense of peace that she once believed only existed in distant dreams. Under his dedicated care and the quiet space of the mountains, her health gradually recovered in an almost miraculous way. The wounds on her body began to heal, and more importantly, the scars in her heart were slowly soothed by the kindness of the man beside her. On the face that once knew only tears, smiles began to appear more often, bright and pure like the morning sunlight breaking through the mountain mist. Every morning she followed him to the garden, harvesting vegetables, caring for flowers, and preparing simple meals filled with warmth and humanity. She discovered a simple happiness she had never experienced before. From the smallest tasks like sweeping the yard or feeding the chickens, she felt true freedom, where she was no longer treated as an object or a tool to repay someone else's debts. Her feelings for Tuan grew naturally and deeply, not only gratitude from someone who had been saved, but also a sincere connection between two lonely souls finding harmony in the vast wilderness. She cherished every moment sitting beside him at sunset, watching the sky fade into darkness, feeling his steady presence like a final peaceful harbor in her life. However, behind that fragile peace and newly formed smiles, a hidden danger was slowly approaching from the dark foothills. The people chasing her from the wedding, the ruthless henchmen of her former groom and her cruel brother had not given up. They continued searching, gathering information, and tracking her. Her traces could be discovered at any moment by their cunning network. Every rustle of leaves or distant barking dog made the atmosphere tense, signaling that a storm was about to strike and destroy everything they had built. The story pauses in a breathless moment of suspense, as love and hope are forced to confront the claws of a cruel past, leaving uncertainty about the fate of Tieu Hue and Tuan on in the days ahead. If you feel moved by their journey and the warmth they share in the middle of life's storm, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support us. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to continue bringing emotional and meaningful stories like this. Thank you for watching and see you in the next chapter.
Nhưng anh vẫn cố tìm cách đi tiếp. Với anh lúc này, việc căn nhà bị phá hủy không còn quan trọng nữa. Điều duy nhất anh cần biết là hai mẹ con có còn an toàn hay không. Khi đến nơi, cảnh tượng trước mặt khiến anh khựng lại. Căn nhà tre đã không còn hình dạng ban đầu mà chỉ còn lại những mảnh gỗ vỡ. Mái lá đã bị cuốn đi, mọi thứ ngổn ngang sau khi trận lũ quét qua. Anh gọi tiểu nữ nhiều lần nhưng không thấy tiếng cô trả lời. Không dừng lại, anh tiếp tục đi sâu hơn, tìm kiếm xung quanh với hy vọng có dấu vết nào đó. Một lúc sau, anh mới gặp được người dân gần đó và biết rằng tiểu nữ đã kịp ôm con chạy thoát trước khi căn nhà bị cuốn đi. Nghe đến đó, Trường mới an tâm, nhưng cảm giác nhẹ nhõm không kéo dài lâu. Hai mẹ con đã thoát nạn, nhưng giờ không còn nơi nào để quay về. Trường lập tức huy động người đến dọn dẹp và dựng lại chỗ ở tạm thời.